It's been a minute, but we are back. I'm Thomas Frank Carr with Greg Pickel here on the Penn State Wrestling Show from Blue White Illustrated. We're here to talk about the Nittany Lions. And one of the reasons we've been gone for a little bit is when Greg has been waiting for some news to break about what's going on with the Nittany Lions in the transfer portal, which is now becoming the news itself, Greg. That's going to be something we talk about here on the show today, but there's a bunch of news that broke on Monday as well. So we have a show stocked with conversation for you here. Please like the video, subscribe to the Blue White Illustrated YouTube channel. Thank you for being here after we took a couple of weeks off after Penn State won the national championship. So, Greg, have you recovered from everything as it's gone down so far in the early off season? How you doing?
I'm good, T-Frank. Good to be back with you. Good to be back chatting with the audience as well. Yeah, the Penn State wrestling offseason is underway after the Nittany Lions clinched yet another NCAA title and also had a few national champions as well back in Cleveland at late March. And yeah, the offseason's rolling. You mentioned the portal. That is upon us, and we are about midway through that window, as a matter of fact. We have some freestyle stuff coming up as that part of the wrestling season gets ready to kick off. So yeah, there's a lot that has gone on for Penn State wrestling so far this year, and a lot more coming as well.
All right. And of course, there's a bunch of stuff going on at BlueWhiteIllustrated.com, including our spring sale. I'm just going to get this out of the way because I keep forgetting to do it on a bunch of our shows. 50% off for the bundle. What is the bundle? Well, you get the national rivals and on three, so our recruiting and our national team stuff, plus Blue White Illustrated, which is dedicated just to Penn State football and wrestling. And of course, then you get a year of the athletic on top of that. So if you like sports, not just wrestling, it's a great deal. Basically, you get four for the price of one, and that price is half off. So even if you just want to try it out, you're wrestling diehard, and you're like, I kind of like other sports. Here's a great opportunity for you to try all the other stuff that we have out at BlueWhiteIllustrated.com. Okay, so Levi Haines finally announces he's going to Final X. Tell us a little bit more about what's going on with Levi and Final X.
Yeah, so we've been waiting for this announcement to drop for quite some time, T-Frank. Levi Haines, a two-time Penn State NCAA champ who is obviously out of eligibility. We knew he was going to now move into the freestyle side of things. He's, of course, competed and done very well in freestyle while he was still wrestling in college at Penn State. But now we know he's finally and officially going to Final X. That obviously is the event that sets the U.S. national team for this year's World Championships at the senior level. He accepted his spot at 79 kilograms after finishing in second at this past year's World Championships before the NCAA season started. So yeah, not unexpected news, just news that felt like it took a little bit longer than necessary to come out. But now that he has decided to declare for 79 kilograms, which is 174 pounds, he will face the winner of whoever wins that weight class at the U.S. Open, which is next week out in Las Vegas. So a lot going on next week between the football blue-white game and the U.S. Open in wrestling that will put us one step closer to knowing who is going to be in Final X, which sets the world team later this month, or I'm sorry, in June rather, for the U.S. at the senior level. So Kyle Snyder also declared Nittany Lion Club wrestling member as well, of course, for 97 kilograms. Trent Hidley, former PA standout, is obviously training down at North Carolina State still. He declared at 92 kilograms, Zahid Valencia at 86, and Real Woods at 65. I think that should be it. I think that I think it's half the weight classes that will need to be contested fully at the U.S. Open, and half of them that will just need to get a winner to figure out who's going to face who at Final X. But yeah, we'll see. I could be wrong about that. There could be one or two other declarations that still need to come. But long story short, for the Penn State guys who want to make the senior world team for the U.S., their time to shine is coming soon. And for Haines, it won't be until June because he was able to declare right to the finals.
Gotcha. What do you think its outlooks are? I know that you're probably still doing work on what the field is going to look like, but just where do you see him positioned kind of in the field as a participant coming up when he gets to Final X?
Yeah, I don't think there's any doubt he'll be favored to earn the U.S. Senior team spot at 79 kilograms again. I just think that what we've seen him do in college, obviously, and then what we saw him do internationally last year. I mean, I look at some of the entries on Flow who are in. Bernie Truax, former Penn State guy, is listed at 79 kilograms. I don't know how he's going to make 79 kilograms, but I guess we'll see. Keegan O'Toole, Missouri's on there. Evan Wick, DJ Hamidi, Chance Marsteller. Of course, you all know that name as well. But yeah, I don't think there's really anyone that'll come close to beating Haines. It's a best of three at Final X to win the spot, and I would expect him to beat whoever he faces 2-0 and take the spot with a sweep. But time will tell. Some other names will pop up. Penn State always registers late for this event and every other event for the most part. So we will see an influx of those guys hitting the entry sheet later this week. Obviously, Haines will not be there because he's already going to Final X, but a lot of Penn State guys will register for the U.S. Open. I think the deadline is Sunday. So it's either going to be over the weekend or late this week when those guys end up entering. So we'll see a lot go out there. A lot of them will punch their ticket to Final X. I have no doubt about that. And yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, I was just gonna say, let's just jump to that with the U.S. Open. Then, you said you expect a bunch of Penn State guys. Do you have some guys in mind that you think are gonna register for this later this week? And people can read about it, by the way, again at BlueWhiteIllustrated.com. What are your expectations?
I would assume all of your everyone you would expect to enter would enter, right? So unless there were guys that needed any kind of postseason cleanup surgery, stuff like that, I would expect all of the starters to register. I would expect guys like Tyler Kazak to register. Joe Seeley could register. Nate Desmond, obviously. I think that it would be surprising to me if a good chunk of Penn State's entire room wasn't there. Sam Herring should be there, I'm sure, probably at 61 kilograms. So, yeah, there should be, and he's a class of 2026 recruit who skipped his senior season to basically work on getting ready for both coming to Penn State and this year's freestyle circuit. So, yeah, I would expect there to be, there's 30-some guys in Penn State's room. I don't know if all 30 will register, but I would be shocked if it wasn't at least 20 or 25. You'll have some of the recruits enter to wrestle at the senior level. Obviously, they can make U23 and U20 teams as well, and some of these guys will do that if they don't make the senior world team. Or you could be PJ Duke and then wrestle all three and then wrestle a full college season. So we'll have to wait and see. But, yeah, the entries list should be out soon. I'm just interested to see what weight some of these guys go in at, T. Frank. So, like Haines obviously declared for 79 kilograms. That's no different than before. Mitchell Mesenbrink, I have no expectation for him to change weight classes, obviously. Josh Barr, I would not expect him to go up in weight. But, where did Marcus Blaze and PJ Dukes go in? Do they go in a little bit heavier than what they wrestled this past college season? And if they do, what does that tell us about where they could be at in next year's lineup? So I think, to me, as much as the outcome and how they do is of interest, it's also what weight class some of these guys go in. And again, some of them will change. There'll be no surprises in terms of where they go in. Other guys could decide to wrestle up a weight, and then you have to figure out, is he wrestling that weight because he doesn't want to keep cutting weight and he will eventually cut weight again in the fall? Or is it because he can't make or doesn't want to make the weight that he was previously at, so he has to go up one? And then if that's the case, what does it mean for Penn State's season in 2026, 2027? So a lot to learn there when Penn State finally puts its entries in, which again will probably be sometime either late this week or early next. We'll certainly cover it over at BlueWhiteIllustrated.com when that happens.
Gotcha. Let's get to the room itself and the roster. So Penn State wins another national championship. They do a lot of what was expected of them, and yet, despite the fact that they have a super deep and talented room, and there are other players out there in other destinations that are trying to build a counterpoint to Penn State within the sport, thinking kind of Oklahoma State, no Nittany Lions are in the transfer portal yet. Do you raise an eyebrow at that? What's going on? We expected some, and there hasn't really been any as of yet. So what do you think's going on here?
So I guess a couple things. One, the portal window is open till April 30th, so there is time for guys to go in. But I think my misread on the situation was for so often in the past, Penn State guys who transferred T. Frank were guys who only have 1 year left to try and get into the starting lineup. Knew they weren't going to be able to do it at Penn State, like a David Evans, for example, at Utah Valley this year had an okay season and an okay national tournament as well. But most of the guys that transferred were in that kind of a situation where they spent as much time as they could at Penn State. We're not going to get into the lineup and thus wanted to try something else. And there's no guys like that on this year's roster, right? So a lot of the guys are at a point where they're either out of eligibility, which is only the case in Levi Haines, Brian Borden, a couple others, or they have multiple years of eligibility left and could end up forcing their way into the lineup via injuries or red shirts or what have you. So point being is that I still am surprised that nobody's gone in, and I don't think it's over just yet. The wrestling portal is not comparable to the football portal for a number of reasons. Obviously, the first one being how dominant Penn State is. There's not really a football equivalent to what this wrestling program is able to do. And because of that, a lot of guys just don't want to leave Penn State and training with the Nittany Lions and the Nittany Lion Wrestling Club, even though they're not getting into the lineup. So that's obviously number one. And then number two, not that Penn State has all the NIL money in the world, but compared to the peers in their sport, there's only a few that, I'm sure they might have a little bit more or in the same ballpark, So if you're going somewhere else, it's unlikely to be, you think about guys guys leaving Penn State football for a bigger payday elsewhere. If you're leaving Penn State wrestling, there's only so many options you're going to get for a bigger payday.
Right.
There's just not as much money in the sport, not as many schools spending than what you have in football and basketball. So I think I overlooked those two factors. At the same time, it still would amaze me if someone or someone's don't hit the portal. But right now, nobody has. Everyone thought Braden Davis would be the first guy to enter the portal. There is absolutely no indication that he is even considering that. So, things can change. Time will tell. But, with, 16 days, I guess, to go in this portal window, there's no Penn State guys in. And if they're going to go in, they better obviously do it soon because spots will start filling up and things like that. So we'll see. Like I said, at this point, there's no rumors, there's no murmuring that someone is going to go in. But at the same time, schools will certainly be out and about at the U.S. Open next week in Las Vegas. Yeah. I don't want to insinuate that anyone will be, what's the word I'm looking for here, T. Frank? Cheating or tampering. Tampering is the word I'm looking for. But, there'll be a lot of coaches out there. So we'll see. But, yeah, right now, no indication that Penn State is going to lose anyone to the transfer portal. Again, I know from the outside looking in, it does not make a lot of sense to people. You look at some of the successful, accomplished wrestlers who are not in the lineup and probably won't be in the lineup this year. And you say to yourself, I can't believe he's not going to go elsewhere. I can't believe so-and-so is going to wait another season to try and make the lineup. But these guys like what they do at Penn State. They like who they do it with, and they obviously know what the coaching staff can help them accomplish. So it looks like a cut and dry. This is why the guy would transfer situation on the outside. On the inside, it's very much cut and dry to why he doesn't want to. So
right,
we'll see, T. Frank, but so far so good on that front for Penn State. All
right, so I think the last thing we have here is Mitchell Mesenbrink, another Hodge Trophy winner for the Nittany Lions, and save this one for last just because, as much as it is a one of those situations where Penn State fans want to revel in the victory, it's unquestioned that he was one of the most dominant wrestlers and was deserving of the trophy. So it's a conclusion, but kind of a foregone conclusion that he was going to win this, it seems, at least from my perspective. I guess, what's your view on the Hodge Trophy and Mesenbrink's career arc to this point?
Yeah, he said at the national tournament that, Ben Askren, his mentor and Wisconsin wrestling coach and great, has Hodge trophies, obviously, at his workout place, and they just collect dust. So, he knows what it is and recognizes that it's a tremendous accomplishment, but also that at the end of the day, it's just a trophy, and they're wrestling for gold medals and things like that. So I think he appreciates what the award means and who it's named after, and winning the award, obviously. He won the vote by a landslide. I don't remember the numbers at this point, but he had 90% of the first place votes, if not more. So deservedly so. Once Jesse Mendez of Ohio State lost in the 141-pound finals, that pretty much locked in and locked up Mitchell Mesenbrink winning the Hodge Trophy. I think that Josh Barr gets it overlooked a bit in this conversation. I really do. I think his season overall is just completely overlooked for a guy that popped his rib in October at World Championships and then comes back in December and really just bullied every single guy he wrestled.
So that's probably why, right?
Yeah.
Because he missed the beginning of the season and because you have the steamroller that is Mesenbrink, you just kind of put on the back burner, right?
Yeah, it's unfortunate, but Mesenbrink has just a little bit more flair to his style, and he scores just a little bit more in the points per department. Yeah. So, I think if you're splitting hairs between those two, you're going to lean Mesenbrink more often than not. But that doesn't change the fact Josh Barr had a tremendous season. And so I just wanted to throw that in there as well. But, Mesenbrink does win the Hodge Trophy, the first one for Penn State in a couple of years. And certainly he was a well-deserving winner, no doubt about that.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see how that plays out next year because you got to feel like most of the favorites are on the Penn State roster still because both Barr and Mesenbrink are returning for next year. Right. One last thing just about the transfer portal and next year and talking about that with so many guys returning to this lineup. What are you seeing here in terms of the pressure cooker of competition within the room and the numbers in the room and how all that's going to shake out? I know we're focusing on the offseason right now, but there's always an eye towards what's coming up for the Nittany Lions next fall. How do you think all this shapes up as we look towards that next run at a national title?
Yeah, so I think you have Luke Liddell at 125. You have Mitchell Mesenbrink at 165. You have Rocco Welsh at 184, Josh Barr at 197, and Cole Mearsole at 285. That should be penned in as far as I'm concerned. But the questions start to come at 133, 141, and 157. 133, obviously, that was an interesting spot for Penn State this year with Marcus Blaze in his first season, and was tremendous for most of the year. Struggled to get the offense going a bit in the national tournament, but still finished as an All-American. So does he stay at 133? Does he redshirt to bump up? We'll have to wait and see. When it comes to 141, he's a part of that conversation. Nate Desmond's a part of that conversation. He could also be a part of the 133 conversation potentially. And so is Ono, of course, who could go to 133. I don't think he goes to 141. If he does take the Matt Massa Ono, I think it'd be 133. But Braden Davis is back. Aaron Nagao obviously is out of the picture now, medically retired. So does Blaze come up? Does Desmond take that job? Does Davis come back? We'll just have to wait and see. But it's a really fascinating thing to see. And then with PJ Duke and Tyler Kazak redshirted this year, presumably with the plan being that Duke would redshirt this upcoming year, his second year on campus, and Kazak would return to the lineup at 157. So the plan you would think is going to be in place, and he's one of the guys I was insinuating or inferring about earlier when I was talking about U.S. Open weight classes. And does he go in the same place as last year, or does he change and bump up a weight? Could tell us who the replacement for Mitchell Mesenbrink is going to be down the road. We'll have to wait and see on that, though. And then 174, Will Henkel, I think is probably who replaces Levi Haines in 2026, 2027. But there's some other guys that could fight for that job as well. So, yeah, I think 70% or so of your weight classes are figured out, and then you just have 33, 41, and 57 that are going to be fascinating to see how all this unfolds this offseason.
Yeah, it's never rebuild. It's always reload. And when you are starting with that kind of baseline, really impressive for Penn State wrestling. And of course, we're going to see how they do in the offseason and how they do in the in the U.S. Open, and at Final X. We'll be following all of that all spring and summer here on the Blue White Illustrated YouTube channel. Greg, great job as always. We'll be back more soon with Penn State wrestling coverage, so make sure you subscribe here to the Blue White Illustrated YouTube channel. You like the video on the way out, you just drop a like in the collection plate. We appreciate you for being here, and we'll be back more with Penn State wrestling in the future here from Blue White Illustrated.